Welcome, everybody, to the EAM hotline. Thank you for joining. And again, if you would, put your name and where you're from. We'd like to welcome you to the EAM hotline. So today, as Enterprise Asset Management Hotline host, I have a special guest today. I would love to welcome Michelle Campos. And Michelle, say hello.
Hi, everyone. Michelle Campos. I'm an ITM solution consultant alongside of Lillian and David, specializing more in the IT asset space, but looking forward to the conversation today. So thanks, Lillian, for having me on.
Thank you for joining us today. And David won't be here today, but he'll be back in January next year. So my name is Lillian Aviles, and I'm a senior solutions consultant. I work alongside Michelle and David with asset management. And our primary focus today is the enterprise side of the house, as I'd like to call everything else. So, Michelle?
Yeah. So safe harbor statements show this each and every time that we're going to be meeting, but basically any forward-looking statements, we want to make sure that we'll call those things out. And I don't think any of our material today, Lillian, is really anything on our roadmap, but if we do state, or if we do go over anything on the roadmap, we'll definitely make sure to call that out. But again, for safe harbor, don't go out and purchase anything that based on any forward-looking statement. So.
Exactly. Thanks, Michelle.
Of course. In the agenda today, so we're going to talk about why EAM. So we'd love to abbreviate everything here, right? Enterprise asset management. Why is it important to have the visibility into your assets, and how do you get benefits from having that visibility? We'll jump into some demonstrations. So I'll show you everyone around some of the workspaces and reporting capabilities that we have within EAM. And then Lillian will take us through what it looks like to request assets, if those assets aren't in stock, ultimately how to go through the procurement process within EAM, and then deploy those, the deployment of the workflows. We'll jump into Q&A with a little poll, and then talk about any upcoming events. So, housekeeping, if you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A. We have other people on the call that definitely can come in and help answer those questions along with Lillian and myself. So
Thank you so much, Michelle.
sure.
And so why the EAM hotline series? So, we're here today to launch these sessions for you. We're going to do them monthly to hear from you, our callers, people who want more information about EAM, also known as Enterprise Asset Management, giving you insight. We want to give you insight into ServiceNow. We want to learn more about how you're doing it, how you manage and maintain your assets in your environment, what are your processes, things of that sort. So we have a little QR code there for you. If you wanted to learn more, just go ahead and take a snapshot of that, or point your phone to it, and it'll bring you to the EAM ServiceNow site. Okay, so let's talk about asset management. So as Michelle mentioned, she comes from the IT side of the house, which a lot of people are very familiar with. You have the hardware assets, which are computers and mobile devices and servers, and then you have the software that sits on those devices, as well as cloud assets. You have your software that's in the sky, and you subscribe to it, and you use it. But today's primary focus is enterprise asset management, whether it's a connected device or a non-connected device. And what does that mean? Well, we'll learn a little bit more about that as we go further into today's session. And by all means, if you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free. We'd like you to participate so that we can help you and help us to help you. ServiceNow is a single platform, as some of you may already know. And if you're not familiar with that, we have multiple solutions from space management to HR, IT, SM, ITOM for monitoring, project management, which is SPM, ESG, which is environmental, and so much more. We are one true source, one location that you can go to integrate with many different solutions. But again, today we're going to talk about enterprise asset management. So I ask you, do you know what kind of assets you have. I put on the screen here for you so you have a visual aid of what are enterprise asset managements. If you're sitting in a chair right now and you've paid money for that, that's an asset. Now, is it a valuable asset to you? That's for you to decide. So here are some examples. Let's say you're in the retail industry and you have refrigeration throughout the store and you want to track the refrigeration. Or let's say you're in the healthcare and you want to monitor fetal monitors or the hospital beds. Or let's say you're in facilities and you have HVACs or cameras, security systems, things of that sort. We cover multiple industries, multiple assets, and they fall into different categories, whether they're leased or purchased on-site, off-site, whether they're mobile, consumable, and so on. So again, we encourage you to ask any questions. So
Lillian, can you go back real quick? I just want to point out a couple things. You know, whenever I introduced myself, right, I said I was on the IT side and I specialized in the IT side. And the reason is I've been a practitioner for a long time in IT asset management. But what I didn't really think about is some of those things that kind of fall outside of the IT space. So some of the things that jump out to me is camera and AV equipment, right? Sometimes you think that that's IT equipment, but in our case, we kind of manage that under enterprise asset. ATMs. I worked for a financial institution. We were managing ATMs before EAM within ServiceNow, right? And it was very manual process because we didn't have the automation around EAM. And so we were just using some of those base tables to capture that information. But now that we've expanded it, we've expanded outside of the IT space, like Leland said, everything else, right? It gives us the capability, if we are trying to manage those assets that are outside of IT, whether you're in facilities or in IT, we give you the capability to do it all within the same platform. So I just said having all of it in the same platform is huge. It gives the visibility into HR, like you were saying, or into whenever an employee's onboarding and they might need a desk that goes along with their laptop, keyboard, mouse, or they need an office. We talked about space, right? Like being able to identify all of that in the same system that everybody else is using is huge. So I just wanted to point that out. I saw ATMs on there. I was like, oh, let me kind of tell my side of the story. But a lot of times what you'll find is there is that bleeding over from IT into enterprise assets and vice versa. So just know that there's a lot of different assets out there that you can encompass, but these are just a few on the slide today.
Oh, it's so true, Michelle. And some use cases are, what questions do you ask yourself? How are these assets going to impact my company if they're down? How is it financially going to impact the company? Are my employees going to be productive? Let's say you have a fleet of vehicles that you utilize to provide a service to the consumer out there. I have a client who has a pest control service and they want to know all of the items that they have in stock and what goes out to the different customers and how often they're used and how much they're spending and who are the vendors that they're going with. So there's so many different types of use cases, so many ways to have insight. Robotics, the machines that actually make the product that you have out there. So think of all of the things that you have within your company and let us know a little bit more about them. If you have any questions on them, we're here to answer. So Michelle, I'm going to move on to the next slide.
Yeah, go for it.
Awesome. All right. So this slide, it looks very confusing, right? Well, I've worked for many companies where it's been like a siloed environment. You have the asset, but you have one system is handling the planning and the acquisition, and another system does the decommissioning and the disposal of it. Another system is doing the installation and deployment. And so that can be very confusing. It's like the left hand is not talking to the right hand. Michelle, what kind of experience have you had with this?
Spreadsheet. Our number one competitor, right? Like everybody lives in spreadsheets and not everybody lives in the same spreadsheet, right? And so they're like going from one spreadsheet to another and it's, tribal knowledge. Somebody has that spreadsheet and doesn't want to share it with anybody else. And And next thing a regulatory space, you're being hit with the audit and you're trying to figure out which spreadsheet's on, who owns it. And so that's kind of some of the experience that I have. But yes, silo tools is a huge problem when you're trying to manage the life cycle of an asset, for sure.
Well, I love that you said spreadsheets because guess what? The next slide is about the gap,
Yeah.
the manual processes, the errors. I used to work with somebody and, who would get their numbers backwards and, it'd be like double check and recheck. And so what's the solution? How do we decrease the cost, reduce costs and the risk in your environment? Well, ServiceNow Enterprise Asset Management, again, it's a single platform. Your processes can be scaled. We integrate with multiple systems, so it's not like we're saying, hey, replace everything you have. We want to bring it all together. Everything works better together. So, Michelle, have you had this experience with ServiceNow and with your customers?
I have. So within the customers, within my own experience as I was maturing, right? And I say maturing, not even just maturing on the platform, but even before I got started on the platform, right? Like I said, spreadsheets. I lived and breathed spreadsheets for a long period of time. But being able to come in, and this is why I'm here. This is why I'm at ServiceNow, because I saw how much more I could progress and how much more visibility I could give to my executives that were asking for information, right? And being able to ultimately give them the information or have them source it themselves, right? So we have that executive asset dashboard where they can go in, and I gave them visibility where they could go in and see what they needed to see and not necessarily dig into the weeds of things that they didn't, right? My spreadsheets, there's no way people were going to be able to make clean data out of that, right? Then needless to say, spreadsheets, as soon as you put it in, it's gone bad, right? The data is not there, right? So, but yes, I've experienced this and helped multiple customers get to this point. But I was one of those customers that was living and breathing the pain behind it. So.
Yeah, I would remember I get these spreadsheets where they had all these formulas going on in the background. One time I accidentally deleted the formula.
Oh.
And it was like, and so one thing that's good about me is that I always make a copy of what I'm working on. So thank God for that. But I deleted the formula and then all the numbers just started changing. I was like, oh my God. But thank God I had a backup plan there.
I would have had to murder you if you messed my formula.
Absolutely. All the work on a ride. So what do we do? How do we solve the fundamental problem of enterprise asset management and the siloed and the gaps? And well, ServiceNow, we take the existing life cycle that assets already have, from planning on through retirement. And again, we give you visibility into that. We help you to see what you have, see where you got it, see what you paid for it, where is it located, who's working with it, are assets sitting somewhere not getting use? Do you have a process in place once you identify them, how to get them in use? Maintaining them, making sure that maybe the manufacturer says the end of life is 5 years, but if you have a scheduled plan to maintain them, they last longer. And what happens? You save money as a result. So I love this product and I'm all pumped up about it, which is why I started us off with that song. And I hope you guys are excited about this too. So, what are your thoughts on this one, Michelle?
Yeah, one thing I want to point out is total cost of ownership, right? So you talked about that life cycle, the 5-year manufacturer. So manufacturer estimates, okay, it's going to last for 5 years. But what happens if you get a limit, right? What happens if you're constantly investing into that asset? At some point, you need to take a step back and say, does it make sense to continue to throw money at this asset, or does it make sense to rip out and replace, right? Total cost of ownership is something that we have within enterprise assets. So being able to correlate all those work orders that are going in and identify how much it costs to decommission something and things of that nature, right? And roll that all up and actually put filters in there to identify when you're getting close to end of life. What about even at the model level, right? So maybe you're finding out that this new model that's supposed to be this up and coming greatest thing is just a problem, right? And I almost want to refer to my car, and I won't name the vehicle that I have, but it's like no matter what vehicle I get from this manufacturer, I'm constantly having problems with it. I'm like, okay, it's the manufacturer, right? So being able to do that at an enterprise level, maybe I should use EAM to manage my car and show the total cost of ownership.
That's a great idea. You and I can talk about that, how we'll get it set up for you.
There we go.
Yeah,
but I think I was really excited to see total cost of ownership. And it is something historical, right? It takes a minute to get to that level of being able to see that detail, but it's a huge, huge thing that you need to be able to identify. From a customer support perspective, you're supporting those, the internal, external customers ultimately, because the last thing they want to be doing is putting in tickets and cases all the time about something that's breaking. And then also from supporting it from a cost perspective.
Exactly. You have the benchmark. So you have, I like to call them bean counters, the people who take care of all the budgets that are out there for the different departments and the assets that they need. And, TCO gives you great insight into you have a benchmark and you don't want to really go over that. You want to be mindful of what you're spending. And like you said, you can compare the different models of an asset. You can see what you're spending. You can see how much maintenance, what are you paying on the contracts just for the support and the warranties and what types of repairs are necessary. So, we bring it all to you. And then the disposal process, which is the retirement here. We want to be mindful that we're compliant. We're disposing of the assets accordingly. We have a proof of certificate showing that they've been disposed accordingly, so that in the event, there might be data on a particular asset. There's a lot of robotics out there with boards in them that hold data. You want to make sure they get destroyed and disposed of properly, so that data is not disposed out there into the world and bring some kind of liability, into the company. So again, with enterprise asset management, we take care of workflows and automations, from acquisition planning to get the assets acquired on through the disposal process. So what does this do for us? So we spoke about the automated asset lifecycle, which already exists on the asset, and you bring it all together. ServiceNow acts like a control tower where all of your data is located in one place. We can be your system of record. Of course, it's great to have us as the system of record, but you might have your system of record in another system. And that's okay, because we integrate and we have a bi-directional relationship with the front-facing information that's shared with us, and we get to manage your inventory. We get to give you insight into the maintenance of those assets. And today we're going to talk about procurement, so I'll dive a little deeper in a moment there. And then the contracts that you have for the different assets. So with that said, and we'll give it to Michelle. Michelle, Workspaces.
All right. Give me just 1 second. Let me fill the screen share. Lily, can you confirm that you can see my screen before I start running us through anything?
I sure can. It looks great.
Okay. So just to kind of level set, I'm at the homepage, right? I'm at the overview. This is that 30,000 foot overview of what's going on in our environment as far as tasks that need to be taken, right? And I'm not going to dive too far into this. The first session Lillian and David went in more into depth around this. So there'll be a recording out there for that that you can definitely follow up on. But we're going to start picking it up further down our workspaces and kind of jump into procurement. So I'm going to pick up the last few workspaces. We'll jump in. I'll show you some of the reporting, the importance behind the reporting, and then we'll pass it over to Lillian to show you how this data is actually coming in, right? So I'm showing you kind of what it would look like if you have a live environment, but Lillian's going to show you how you actually take the environment and use it. So this procurement workspaces is dedicated to identifying things that are out there on order, right? Whether it needs to be ordered, whether it's pending shipment or delivery, or whether it's been received and ultimately needs to be deployed out to an individual or to a location. But you can see here the procurement overview. I kind of minimize these important actions, but again, keeping track of things that are missing data, making sure that's holistic in your environment. As I go down to the overview page, you can start seeing here things that are, again, pending delivery. Keeping in mind, we do have integrations with the shipping carriers, so you can actually see real-time shipment information that's coming in on these assets. I can see things that are pending approval. If I'm wanting just some reporting capabilities, I can see who I order a lot of my equipment from, dollar-wise, lots of detailed information. The one that I think Lillian will be jumping into, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lillian, is really requesting. So she's going to jump in here and see what are some requests that are coming in and take actions on those. Very important to be able to identify things quickly. The other thing I do want to call out, this is using ServiceNow procurement tables, but you can do an integration, as Lillian said earlier. So integrate with your procurement system if you already have one, and let them either communicate bidirectionally, or you can have it just communicate directly to the procurement system, however you want to do that. So we're not looking to rip out and replace, we're looking to hopefully integrate within that. Another important thing that around tracking assets is identifying contracts. Those could be leases, those could be maintenance, that could be warranty, any kind of contract that you have out there around those assets. We want to tie those in. And the reason is one, a lot of times you need to understand, like on a maintenance contract, what's covered under that maintenance contract, what assets are covered, right? So being able to tie them in together is going to give you that holistic picture. And I'll just take you into one really quickly, and I'm not going to dive too far into this, but whenever I'm talking about what assets are covered, you can see here in this specific contract, these two assets are tied to it. So a lot of times one contract covers multiple assets. So you want to make sure that you can tie them in together. You can always add and remove assets depending on what you need to. You can also attach the contract here and see that information, approval history, lots of information. But the importance is, importance of what I use it for is ultimately being able to tie many assets to one contract and be able to go into that asset and see exactly what is covered and not covered within that asset. You can also have we also have a contract renewal flow, right? So there's a whole renewal process around that, which we can dive into later. If you have questions, let me know. The last thing I wanted to point out is the work management. So identifying any work orders or preventative maintenances that are out there that need actions upon them. This is that workspace that you can see, the work that ultimately needs to be put in. So parts that are required or requested. You can also come in here and see equipment that has maintenance on the asset. So lots of additional reporting that you can come in here and get into without having to manipulate spreadsheets in my past life, right? So again, Workspaces, the last one, I did say that was the last one, but I'll kind of give this overview. This is the asset operation. So we say this is kind of that catch-all that maybe there's not some reporting widgets out there, but these will get you into like the shipping of the assets, any onboarding that you're trying to do for specific assets, moves, and calculations. So that is the last Workspaces that I'll be going into. Lillian, anything that you wanted me to show that maybe I didn't hit on or you want to add to?
Actually, let's drop down to the bottom one. We're going to dive deeper, of course, at another time, but you have the gears on the bottom on the navigation. And this is also the admin center. This is where you can have access to the model categories and building out your environment, the configurations of the different items involved with utilizing the system as a whole. So Michelle, this is wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing the workspace overview with everyone, and be mindful that, come back. We're going to have different sessions that are going to drill down and give you more insight to each of those areas. But for today, we're going to focus on the request and procurement. So thank you so much, Michelle.
I'll stop sharing and pass it back to you, Lillian.
Okay, so this is where we have our share break. Go ahead and share. So we left off with the slide for Workspaces. Michelle, can you see me okay?
I can, and I just want to remind anybody, if you have questions, please throw them in the Q&A. We can definitely get to those questions at any point, whether it's live or, whether somebody takes it offline. But please, again, don't forget to throw any questions you have in Q&A. Sorry, Lily. I can see your screen just fine.
All right, super. So here's just a quick slide showing you that I'm gonna go into the request and the procurement and the workflow. We start from the catalog request on through to deployment. And you'll see here that we have an approval process in place, the sourcing and how you can source it, the integration with the ERP system that you have, and then the receipt of the assets so that it can be deployed. And in this process, we'll continue also with the deployment. I'll show you the process from the user's perspective, and then we'll actually have the technician go out and deploy the asset to them. So we'll come back to this slide here, and we're going to move into the actual ServiceNow page. So be mindful that this demo, I am an administrator, so you'll see up here, there I am. So I'm acting as the administrator. What roles would be involved in this process? So on the portal, this is the out-of-the-box view that I have for my environment. So whatever colors you have, however you have it structured and organized, might be different, but for demonstration purposes, I have mine set up this way. So as the admin, or maybe I might be Mary Jane or Bob Joe, I'm going to go into the Enterprise Asset Management, and I'm going to choose all of the assets because I'm not quite sure what industry it may fall under. And again, be mindful that depending on what your environment is, you may not see all of these particular asset topics. But for demonstration purposes, I can see it all. So I'm looking to, just as a user, and the user has access to what the company decides to give them access to. So again, as an administrator, I can see all the assets that are in the system. But if you worked for a particular department, you might just see assets that pertain to your particular environment. So I'm looking for an industrial asset that I know, and it's a diesel generator, and it's the K19 series. And you'll see that there's a price tag of $484,000 that was just showing here. That's a lot of money. So I need to be somebody pretty special to be able to, first of all, have access to this type of asset. And then there's an approval process in place. But first I want to order it. So just like any shopping cart experience, I get the details of what the asset is. I choose the location that I want it in. I can add attachments. Maybe I need an approval letter from my manager, ahead of time. And I go ahead and I order this. And upon ordering it, maybe Joe Enterprise was the person who said, Lillian, can you do me a favor and place that order for me? So I'm like, sure, Joe, let me go on and do that. You have additional delivery information. And since I chose New York City, even though Joe's from California, I'm going to say, please make sure you deliver to Joe in New York City. Why? Because he's going to be there for the next 6 months, and I want to make sure that he gets it. I could put some special instructions and then just go ahead and check out. So upon checking out, the system is working in the background and it's creating what is called a request. And in that request, I've chosen the K19 series diesel generator. So I want to be able to kind of track this. I'm going to open this up in another tab just to show you the flow and the experience that the user has and how this user, which is myself who ordered it, the request for Joe, can communicate with the person in behind the scenes and send them messages and engage with them from this place. And you'll see here that we have an RITM. Well, this is the item under this particular request that I chose, like a shopping cart, and this is one single item that I want to be fulfilled. I can have multiple items in that request, just so that you know. So if you have any questions about this, please feel free to send them our way. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go ahead, let me go ahead and close all these tabs and start off with the procurement tab, which Michelle had showed you. And so you'll see here that the request that I just showed ends with 96. So if I go over here, that's the same request. So let's go ahead, and I have what is called a snapshot view into the requests that are being sourced. And I also have a snapshot view into the purchase order, which once we start working on this request, you'll see how we get to the purchase order. So in this request, here again, it was requested for Joe, and it was opened by me today. The item that was requested is $484,000. And here is the RITM number, which is the item number up here, that's showing the stage that it's been a request for approval. So upon going back here, I see that I have two approvers. So those approvers are Eric and Casey. So for demonstration purposes, I can either impersonate them or log in as them and approve. But because I'm an administrator, I have the ability to just double click on this space and change requested to approved. Now, the way that this particular flow goes is the company has decided that you don't need two approvers, only one of them is necessary. So now that it's been approved, I always like to click on the Save button. The workflow goes to the catalog task. And in this catalog task, it identifies that it's still open. It's a task that needs to be fulfilled, and we need to source the requested item, which is the generator. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this request. So in this request, you'll see again that it's open. It has not yet been requested, and I'm going to go ahead and source the request. So as the user, you'll see here that the stage has changed. So the waiting approval has been completed, and now we're in the fulfillment process of the workflow. So I go ahead and I source the request as an asset manager, somebody who has the proper roles to have access to this environment. So upon clicking that, you'll see here that it identifies again that it was requested for Joe. He's in the New York City campus, and we want to purchase it so that we can send it to him. In the event I have assets elsewhere, I can source through a distribution channel that might take care of the area. And if I were to click that and there were items available locally, then these numbers would change. But we don't have them available, which is why we're going to do the single purchase. Upon choosing the purchase, what's also available to you is, let's say you have a blanket PO and you don't want to just purchase this one item, you want to add it to an existing item because maybe you get a discount by doing a blanket PO and you get multiple items from this particular company. So I go ahead and I click on purchase, and you'll see that the vendor I'm using is the manufacturer who makes this. You can identify whatever vendors that you want. I want a single quantity. I know it's out of stock, and I want to put it in the EAM stockroom East. And of course, you could identify whatever stockroom you may have in your environment. So that'll be a whole nother session for you. I go ahead and I click submit. Okay. So it's been submitted, and you'll see here it's been approved. Again, I've identified the asset. I go over to the purchase order, and I see here that it's been requested to be purchased. There's the total cost, and there is the purchase order number, 134. So just real quick, let's go back to the procurement tab, right? And go back to the overview. And on the overview, when I refresh this, there it is, 134. So let's say I get interrupted for the day and, oh, where did that purchase order go? I can easily go back to the home page, the landing page, as we like to call it, and just go ahead and process the purchase order. Michelle, you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I was thinking, in our example, right, Lillian's doing it all. She's this superwoman, right? But in real life, a lot of times the purchase orders are handled by your finance team, right? And so kind of like Lillian said, is if you got, distracted and you needed to come back, but what about if you're not even the one doing the purchase order, right? So at that point, you made the request as the asset manager, right? Managing the asset. Now it's time for the procurement team to pick it up, right? And so they could go in and have the same view and do it, right? Different ways that it could flow, but that's kind of what came to my mind is Lillian. We don't all have superhero women out there like Lillian that are going to do it all, right? And so that's the beauty. Yeah, that's the beauty again of the platform is everybody's living and working in the same tool, and so they can ultimately pick it up when it's left off, right? Within the task management and things of that nature.
That's exactly right. And you know what? And then you say to yourself, well, how are they going to know? Well, we can send an email notification, whatever system you might use. If the person's out of the office and you have a backup person, you might set up a flow that notifies that person, and then they access their purchase orders and they go in and they begin the process of this open purchase order. How are we going to fulfill this? So, all right, so let's change hats. So now I'm the purchase order manager and I go on in and I open up this purchase order. I've been notified by email, so there could be a link within my email that brings me directly to this particular page. And I see here that there is 134. So in this process, I see that it's been requested. I identify, well, what is it that they want? They want the generator. It's $484,000. Well, let's go ahead and go back to the details. Maybe I need to put in additional information in here throughout the different form. So again, whatever your process may be, out of the box, this is what we have. But if there's different things that you need to have showing, ServiceNow is very configurable and we can adjust to your processes and environment. So now as the procurement manager, I'm going to go ahead and place this order. So in doing so, I'm going to go back here and you'll see the stages. So right now, Joe Enterprise knows that the fulfillment has been completed and he's awaiting delivery. So he's really excited and he might want to send a message and say, oh, hey, do you have any idea when I might be able to get this? But for demonstration purposes, we're just going to go back over here to the procurement page and you'll see here that it has been ordered. There's the PO date. Again, here is the item that was ordered, and I'm going to go ahead as the procurement manager, and I'm going to click on receive. So upon receiving now, Michelle, maybe you can help me elaborate on this. We have something known as AC, ACN, ASN, where you can ahead of time receive a list of the assets, and it's an automated process that the assets get matched up to what's been received. And so this can happen for you automatically. But if it's a single item and you've made the purchase, you can go ahead and go in and insert the row and add the asset tag and the serial number. Michelle, would you like to elaborate on that feature as I fill this out?
Yeah. So it's called the Advanced Shipment Notice, ASN, and it's not a terminology owned by ServiceNow. It's a standardized terminology that I would say 99%, maybe 95, maybe I'm hitting it too high, but 99% of the vendors out there, the VARs that you're ordering from are familiar with Advanced Shipment Notice, right? And so they can send you that. ServiceNow can digest that information, again, making sure that it ultimately maps to the correct fields and those assets get created. The awesome thing about it is it creates those assets and it automatically puts them in transit, right? So it shows that they're on order in transit. It will not show them actually being delivered. So that way you're aware. I use that on the IT side to let my warehouse managers know when large shipments were coming in, right? When we ordered Cisco equipment for a refresh, they had to make space in the warehouse to receive those assets. So I'm assuming this $500,000 unit is going to take up some space. There's got to be some coordination that's going on for people to ultimately be able to be receiving it and getting it where it needs to go, right? So being able to identify things that are in transit and coming and drop shipping at your location is a huge need. and using the ASN will help with that. So.
Exactly. And that's exactly the case. And of course, we have other products that help you with that particular project and making sure you have the space and the timeline and everything works in conjunction with procuring this asset. So because it's a single asset, I go ahead and I put in my fictitious asset tag and serial number. You can use a scanner. There's multiple ways, different ways that you can enter. They don't have to be the same number. They could be the number of what your environment is. So I go ahead and I enter that information in. You'll also notice that one of them was mandatory and the other one was not. So I only had to enter the asset. So upon doing that, I'm going to go back over here to the purchase order. And I'm going to click save, and you'll see upon saving, an asset now appears, and you'll see the status is received. So when I go in, I'm confirming that it is the generator. I go here and I see that it's pending install and it's in stock. I go to the receiving slip to confirm it has been received. When was it received? And where has it been located? So now we change hats again. Even though I'm still logged in as the administrator, now you might have the receiving and shipping area, people who handle the stockroom. So now they get a notification, and in that notification, it brings them in here and they get to go into their stockroom. So the stockroom, of course, you can define where it is. What's great about the stockrooms is you can see all the tasks that are specific to the assets in that particular location. And our primary focus today is the enterprise asset that we just procured. So when I go in here, and of course, I always like to do my refresh there, I can clearly see that my asset, the K19 is here. And I see that it's in New York City, which is my New York City campus. I see that it's in stock. And again, confirmation, pending install. So when I open up this asset, we are now in a position to fulfill the deployment portion of this. So you'll see here that this is the actual asset pending install. It's in stock. And I have my related tasks. This is where I would end up assigning it to Bob Techie. Okay, let's try that again. All right, it's not letting me assign. So that's something that can be adjusted and looked at a later date. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on fulfilling this pick asset from inventory. So we're going to go ahead and go in as Bob Techie. Let me change my screens here. And here we have Bob Techie. You'll see on the right-hand corner, I'm acting as Bob. You'll see that the K19 series has been opened. And we're going to go ahead and deploy this asset. Okay. Oops. My apologies there. Okay.
One thing while you're getting that up, I wanted to point out is when we were looking at the assets earlier, you could see that there were four different assets that were kind of showing up. But if you looked at the description of the asset, they were actually children of the parent asset. So again, Lillian and David went over that in the last session as how we do our alignment from simple assets to, I would say, complicated assets, right? Multi-component assets, but being able to identify how many assets roll up to that parent asset. And so that whenever I first looked at it, I was like, why does he have so many assets? But if you actually get down to the nitty gritty, you could see that they were actually children assets of that one. So I just wanted to call that out.
So here are the assets. And remember when I was in the stock room, you saw that there were the same asset tags, S1, S2, S3. These are the components to that particular asset that Michelle just spoke of. And so there is the related task. And what I did was I went in and I opened it and I decided, let me just go ahead and assign it to the enterprise asset tech. And then upon doing that, I have the ability to choose Bob Techie. So thank you, Michelle, for that. So we go ahead and we save this. We've assigned it to Bob. And now I'm going to go over and refresh. And we'll see that we have those 3 assets in there. Okay. So we go ahead and we fill in the information. I can pick a particular drop-off location, but for right now, we want to deploy this. So let me go back over here and show you again the process. Here's the stage. We're awaiting the delivery. Okay. And now we're awaiting the pickup because the delivery has been completed. So we go ahead and we close this task because Bob has picked it up from the room. So the task has been closed successfully. We go back here and the pick is complete. I go ahead and I refresh that. And now you'll see that we are in the deployment process.
Showing that, I don't know if we've stressed how important that is, but you know, CSAT is important, right? Understanding and your customers, whether those are internal customers or, you know, your employees, external, being able to show them real time how things are moving, right? That it doesn't go into this black hole. I can't tell you how many times I would hear things go into black hole and I never know when I'm going to get them, right? Or somebody coming to my desk, right? Back in the old days, before COVID, when everybody was in the office, or somebody emailing me or teamsing me, what's up with this? What's the status? What's this? Giving them the ability to go in and see where it's at in the, you know, in the sourcing phase is really important. Now you can reduce the number of, you know, like it showed picking versus delivery. I don't know if I would show that level of granularity. You have the ability to pick and choose what you want to show them, but at least being able to show them that it's pending delivery or it's on its way to them, right? I think those are really huge, important things to be able to show the customer. Or I say customer, I call everybody a customer. if you're not on my team, you're a customer. So
well, I like that. So all right, so you know, Bob Techie just picked it up from the inventory. It was assigned to him. It's closed complete, and now he's on to deploy the asset. So we go ahead and we open up that particular record. You know, he's got this, he could have it on his mobile device, he could do it on his laptop. And of course, I'm not going to show you the mobile today. That'll be a whole nother session. So he goes and he delivers it and he closes that task. And now you'll see when we refresh this, it's closed complete. It had been assigned to Bob Techie. And the last item that we have is the onboarding. Now, of course, this is not what Bob Techie does, and you'll see that I'm still the administrator acting as if I am Bob Techie. And we're going to leave it right here. And why is that? Because onboarding is a whole nother environment. It talks about the playbook and how you can have a structure to onboard the assets, and it can associate maintenance plans with it and contracts and all sorts of goodies. So for right now, when we look back at the request, you will see that Joe Enterprise is thrilled. And what does Joe do? He says, "Thank you so much for my generator." Now, Joe is pleased because he doesn't have to worry about power getting lost or his employees not able to show up because there's no lights and the refrigerator, the food's going to go bad because he has his generator working A-OK in his environment. So if you guys have any questions on assets, put in the chat. You know, what kind of assets do you have? What kind of use cases would you be interested in? Michelle, you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of give some examples of ATMs that I did or vaults, you know, from the financial industry, but a lot of customers that we're talking to, like I have customers that are looking to do it from a manufacturing standpoint, right? So they're looking to use it not just for things that keep their lights on as generator, right? Or their AC going. That's from Houston and Florida, know how important that is. but they use it because that's their bread and butter. That's what they're ultimately developing and selling, and bringing revenue into their company. So one customer I talked to, they build drones, right? And I thought that was very cool. And then I had kind of a boring conversation with other customers where they're just looking to manage their paintings on their walls, right? And I say boring. Everybody, we've got to manage these things because it's really important to ultimately, like, those are very expensive paintings. I can only imagine what they who would be murdered, or who would be murdered if one didn't get one ended up missing, or one didn't get cleaned or taken care of in a proper manner. But I think that's probably the coolest thing within EAM is the use cases, right? We hear so many different use cases and of what people are trying to manage, and so it's really fun to get into some of the art, what's the word I'm looking for? Architecture of their assets and how they're looking to manage them. So I think that's the fun part of EAM.
Oh yeah, I so agree. I can't tell you how many rooms, storage rooms I walked in, and you can barely open the door because they have piles of assets on top of each other, and people say, "Hey, what's in that room?"
Yeah.
Or how many people, can you believe it that chairs? I mean, chairs are real expensive, $1,400 a pop for a chair, and they are repairable. So be mindful of, what do you know about EAM and what more would you like to know? We're here today to give you that. And so in January, so Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, all the holidays that are coming up. We just had Thanksgiving. My turkey was real yummy. How was yours?
We had two. So we actually did a smoked turkey and a fried turkey. Both were great. This was my first time having a smoked turkey. It was amazing. Amazing.
Nice. Well, I must have missed that invitation, Michelle. Maybe next year, right? So
we have to get to Houston.
Exactly.
To Houston.
In January, we're going to talk about maintenance plans and work orders. And here are some upcoming events that we have. Go ahead and take the QR codes and go ahead and register for our January 14. Again, we're going to talk about maintenance plans and work orders. And David will be back in January next year. You know how we all say, see you next year. And go ahead and scan and register for the January course here as well. So thank you, Michelle, so much for being here, and appreciate it. And thank you, everybody who has attended. And there may be a survey at the end. If you do not receive it, don't worry. I'll be sure to send it to you in a follow-up email so that you can give us some feedback. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone.